Hey Charger History! Today's essential question is, what are primary and secondary sources? When I say pause, please pause this video, skip one line in your notebook, and copy this question. Pause. Now draw a vertical line under your question to the bottom of the page. So who can be a historian? A historian means a person who studies history. Is a historian only a person like this? No. Being a historian is actually more like this. Learning history is all about research, looking for clues to the past, just like a detective. But the clues, when we talk to historians, have an academic name: primary sources. That brings us to our first central idea. Let's define what a primary source is. On the left side of your line, write primary source. Then copy the details on the right side of your line. Information from a person who was really there for an event, time, or place. Another detail is that primary sources are usually in first-person point of view. Please pause if you need more time to copy. So a primary source is information from a person who was really there. They might have seen an important event. They might have lived in a long ago time period. They might live in a faraway place with a different culture than us. But either way, they see things that we don't see, and we can find clues from their life to find out more about their time. I'm going to show you some examples of primary sources, and I want you to remember that all of them give us information about people that we normally wouldn't get to know. The first is letters. When you read a letter from someone, you get to know a little part of their life. When you hear a speech, you get to know what it was like during a certain time period. Photographs are like a window into the past. You get to see what different time periods looked like, or what different places look like. Journals and diaries. You get to hear the innermost thoughts of a stranger and find out what it's like to live in their place or their time. An interview. When someone talks about how their life is or something they saw, they give you details that you can use to learn more about their experience. An autobiography is a book that's written about somebody, about their own life. Malcolm X, Barack Obama, even Justin Bieber. They all write about what it's like to be them, and those give us clues to find out more about their experience. And last, artifacts. These are what we're going to be using during our first unit of history class to find out more about ancient farming and ancient hunter-gatherers. Artifacts are just objects from a different time. So basically, anything old or anything from a faraway place could be an artifact. Please take a minute to write down 3 examples in your notebook of primary sources. Please write your examples under the definition that you wrote before, and leave space because you're going to be writing another central idea. Now that you've written your examples, let's write our second central idea, which is secondary source. A secondary source is a written record from someone who was not really there. In this case, you would use a third-person point of view, like he, she, or they. Let's see some examples. A secondary source could be a textbook, a website with lots of articles teaching us about history, an encyclopedia. It could be a book encyclopedia. It could also be the online encyclopedia like Wikipedia. newspaper and magazine articles, or even teachers. Anything that teaches you about a different place or time could be a secondary source. But these secondary sources were not really there when the event happened, or they have not actually lived in the place that we're talking about. So I wonder, would this be a primary or a secondary source? How about this one? A documentary about child soldiers in Uganda. Why do historians prefer primary sources? Primary sources are clues to the past, and they let historians decide for themselves what really happened. Secondary sources have already been interpreted. People who were not there decide for you what happened, and then they teach everybody else. So there's nothing wrong with secondary sources. Secondary sources aren't lying to us, they're still true. But just remember that secondary sources were written by people who did their research, and then they made the decision for you. Primary sources help historians decide for themselves what really must have happened. You, as a historian, you can use secondary sources. You will. You'll use the internet. You'll use books. You'll even use me as your teacher. But you must learn to research primary sources yourself.